So, friends, today we are going to discuss about Indus Valley civilization, which is also known as Harappan civilization. Harappan civilization is one of the most ancient civilizations of the world. It was believed to be the hub of art and culture and architecture. The discoveries made at these archaeological sites give us the great insight to the lives and lifestyles of our ancestors. Let us learn about this very important part of our history. Introduction to the Harappan civilization. Harappan is known to be a 4,700 years old city in the subcontinent which was discovered around the time 1920. Soon after the discovery of cities like Lothal, Dholaviria, Mohenjo-daro and Kalibang have also been discovered at and very in Punjab region, where come to be known as the Harappan cities or also the advent of Harappan civilization. These cities were discovered around the river Indus, henceforth proving the existence of Indus Valley civilization. Architecture. Harappan city was divided into two or more parts of which the part of the west smaller, however higher, known to be as a cathedral. Also, the part of east was comparatively larger but lower, and the archaeologists called it as the lower town. The cathedral compressed granaries, religious buildings, public buildings, and assembly hall, while the lower town was divided into rectangular section cut by wide roads at the right angle to each other. Harappan objects were made of stone, steel, metal, copper, bronze, were used to make tools, weapons, ornaments, and vessels. Gold and silver were used to make ornaments and vessels. Harappan also made stone shields. They made pots with beautiful black designs. Brick were also made that they had seemed to have lasted 4,000 of years, 400 of years, and were laid in the interlocking pattern which made the walls strong about 150 years ago. Many of these bricks were taken away by the engineers at the archaeological sites. People built one or more storehouses on either side of the roads with rooms built around the courtyard. The Harappan city had a well planned drainage system where house had a drain connected to the street drains which further were connected to the bigger drains. The drains were also covered with stone slabs that were laid in a straight lines along with inspection holes for the cleanup purpose. Farming. Some of farming methods and rearing as followed by the Harappa farmers and herders are Harappa grew wheat, barley, pearls, peas, rice, sesame, linseed, and mustards. They also developed some new methods of farming with tools known as plough and used for dig earth for planting seeds and turning the soil. A method of irrigation was used to was used due to less rainfall. The Harappa reared cattle, sheep, goat, and buffalo. Water and fetchers were present around many sites. People collected fresh fruits, fish, and hunted wild animals. Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Lothal also had huge storehouses used for storing grains and hence were called as granaries. Big fire altars were found at Kalibang in Punjab, Kalibang area, which is now located in Punjab region, Lothal, and in the province of Punjab, Lothal used for performing sacrifices. Lothal was also relieved as a huge dockyard for food, loading and unloading goods. There are three basic occupations of people living in Harappan cities. They planned they planned the construction of special buildings in the city. They probably sent people to distant lands to get raw materials, and they kept the most valuable objects of themselves. Scribes were people who knew to write the prepared scribes. Scribes were people who know to write the prepared seals. Craft person, the person who made all the kinds of things, were called as craft persons. They are very important. They made crafts to the people who live in Harappa. Some farmers and herders also lived outside the city, helping the people. So, introduction of Harappan culture. The Harappan seal is possibly the most distinctive artifact of the Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, made of a stone called statue. Seals like this is one of the often contained animal motifs and signs from a script that remains undeciphered. We Yet we know a great deal about the lives of people who lived in the region, from what they left behind their houses, pots, ornaments, tools, and seals. In other words, from archaeological evidence. Let us see what we know about the Harappan civilization and how we know about it. We will explore how archaeological material is intercepted and how the interception sometimes change. Of course, there are some aspects of civilization that are as yet known and may even remain so. The Indus Valley civilization is also called as the Harappan civilization. This civilization was found near to the Indus River, so it is known as Indus Valley civilization. Archaeologists use the term culture for a group of objects distinctive in style that are usually found together within a specific geographical area and a period of time. In the case of Harappan culture, these distinctive objects include seal, beads, weight, stone, blades, and even baked bricks. These objects were found from area as a part of Afghanistan, Jammu, Balochistan, Pakistan, and Gujarat, as well as in maps named after Harappa, the first site where this unique culture was discovered. The civilization is dated between c. 2600 and 1900 BCE. There were earlier and later cultures often called earlier Harappan and late Harappan in the same area. The Harappan civilization is sometimes called as Mutual Harappan culture to the distinguish it from their cultures. We found of different types of objects which are weights, beads, blades, etc. Beginning, there were several archaeological culture in region prior to the muture of Harappan These cultures were associated with distinctive pottery, evidence of agriculture and pastoralism, and some crafts. Settlements were generally small and there were virtual no longer buildings. It appears that there was a earlier break between earlier Harappan and the Harappan civilization, evident from large scale of burnings at some sites, as well as abandonment of certain settlements, subsistence strategies. If you look at the maps or the previous maps of Harappan culture, we will notice that the mutual Harappan culture developed in the sum of areas occupied by earlier Harappan culture. This culture also shared certain common elements, including subsistence strategies. The Harappans ate a wide range of plant and animal products, including fish. Archaeologists have been able to reconstruct their diet, dietary practices from find of charred grains and seeds. These are studied by archaeobotanists who are specialists in ancient plant remain grains found at Harappan sites, including wheat, barley, lentil, chickpea, chickpea, and sesame. Millets were found from sites in Gujarat. Finds of rice were relatively rare. Animal bones found at Harappan sites include those who those of cattle, sheep, goat, buffalo, and pig. Studies done by archaeogeologists or geoarchaeologists indicate that these animals were domesticated in Harappan culture. Bones of wild species such as boar, deer, and Garel were also found. We do not know whether the Harappans hunted these animals themselves or obtained meat from other hunting communities. Bones of fish and fowl were also found. Agriculture technologies. While while we speak about Harappan agriculture, we have to start it is as a cultural or which is historical of the Harappan culture. While the prevalence of culture is indicated by finds of grains, it is most difficult to reconstruct actual agriculture practice where seeds broadcast scattered on ploughed lands, representation on seals and terracotta sculpture indicate that the bull was known and archaeologists extrapolate from this that oxen were used for ploughing. Moreover, terracotta models of the plough have been found at the sites of Cholistan, Cholistan and at Banveli, Haryana. Archaeologists have also found the evidence of a ploughed field of Kalibangan, Rajasthan, associated with early Harappan levels. The field had two sets of furrows at right angles to each other, suggesting that two different crops were grown together. Archaeologists have also tried to identify the tools used for harvesting. Did the Harappans use the stones blades set in wooden handles? Did the Harappans use the stone blades to set the wooden handles, and did they metal tools? House metal tools. Most Harappan sites were located in same arid lands where irrigation was probably required for the agriculture. Traces of canals have been found at the site of Harappan's Shortugai in Afghanistan, but not in Punjab or Sindh. If it is possible that ancient canals slitted up long ago, it is also likely that water drawn from wells was used for irrigation beside water reservoirs found in Dolaveri, Gujarat may have been used to store water for agriculture. Processing food for required griddling equipment as well as vessels for mixing, blending and cooking. These were made of stones, metals and terracotta. This is an expert from one of the earliest reports on excavation of Mohenjo-daro, the best known Harappan sites. Sandal cranes were found in considerable numbers and they seem to have been the only means in use for gridding cereals. As a rule, they were roughly made of hard, gritty, igneous rock and sandstone and mostly show signs of hard usage as their as their bases were usually convex. The most have been set in the earth and in the mud to prevent their rocky. Two main type have been found, those on which another smaller stone was pushed or rolled to and fro, and other with which a second stone was used as a ponder, eventually making a large cavity in nether stone. Currents of the former type were probably used slowly for grain, the second type possible only for ponding herbs and spices for making curries. In fact, the stone of this latter type was dubbed curry stone by our non-workmen, and our cook asked for the loan of one from museum for use in the kitchen. Mohenjo-daro, a planned urban center. Perhaps the most unique feature of Harappan civilization was the development of urban centers. Let us have a look. Let us have a look in Mohenjo-daro very closely. Although Mohenjo-daro is the most well-known site, the first site to be discovered was Harappa. The settlement was divided into two sections, one the smaller but higher and the other much larger, lower. Archaeological distinguish this called as cathedral and the lower town respectively, as we discussed earlier, lower town respectively. The cathedral was its height to fact the buildings were constructed on mud bricks platforms. It was walled, which meant that it was physically separated from the lower town. The lower town was also walled. Several buildings were built on on a platform which served as foundation. It was been calculated that if one laborer moved roughly a cubic meter of earth daily just to put up the foundation in the place it would have required for million person days. In other words, mobilizing labor on every large scale. consider something else. Once the platform were in the place, all buildings activity within the city was restricted to a fixed area on the platform. So it seems that the settlement was first planned and then implemented accordingly. Other signs of planning, including bricks, which whether whether sun dried or baked, were were of a standardized ratio, where the length breadth were four times and twice of the height, respectively, such as bricks were used to Harappan settlements. Laying out drains, as we discussed earlier, laying out the drains. One of the most distinctive features of Harappan cities was the carefully planned drainage system. If you look at the plan of Lower Town, you will notice the roads and streets were laid out of a long, an approximate grid pattern intersecting at a right angle. It seems that streets with the drain and the laid out of than houses built along them. If domestic waste water had to flow into the street, drains were every house needed to have at least one wall along the street. Technique, technique, Techniques for make beads differed according to the material. Set at a very soft stone was easily worked, so beads were molded out of paste made with the acetate powder. This permitted making a variety of shapes, unlike the geometrical form made out of harder stones. How the acetate microbead was made remains a puzzle for archaeologists study ancient technology. Archaeologist experiments have revealed that the red color of crinoline was obtained by firing the yellowish raw material and bead at various stages of production. Noodles were chipped into the rough shape and then finally flagged into the final form. Final form. Gridding, polishing, and drilling completed the process. Specialized drills have been found at Chanchadaro, Lothal, and more recently at Dolviria. If you have looked at Nageshwar and Balakot, you will notice that both settlements were near the coast. These were specialized center for making shield objects, including bangles, ladles, and shield objects, which were taken to the other settlements. Similarly, it is likely that finished products such as beads from Chaundaro and Lothal were taken to a large urban centers such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. In order to identify centers of craft production, archaeologists usually look for the following raw materials such as stone, noodles, whole shields, copper or tools, unfinished objects, rejects, and waste material. In fact, waste is the one of the most best indicators of craft work. For instance, if shield or a stone is cut to the make objects, then pieces of this material will be discarded as the waste at the place of production. Sometimes larger waste pieces were used up to make smaller objects, but minu- minuscule bits were usually left in the work area. These traces suggest that apart from small specialized centers, craft production was also undertaken in large cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Strategies of procuring materials as if obsessive, a variety of materials were used for craft production, while some such a clay were locally available. Many such a stone, timber, and metal had to be procured from outside the alluvial plain. Terracotta toy models of bullock crafts suggest that this was one of the important means of transporting goods and people across land routes, riverine routes along the Indus and its tributaries, as well as coastal routes were also probably used. Materials from subcontinent and beyond. Materials from the subcontinent and beyond. The Harappans procured materials for craft production in various ways. For instance, they established the settlements such as Nageshwara and Bollakot in areas where shields was available. Other such sites were Sotoguay in far off Afghanistan near the best source of lapis lazuli, a blue stone that apparently were high valued and local, which was near source of Caroline from Baruchi in Gujarat, Satite from South Rajasthan and North Gujarat, and metal of Gujarat, Rajasthan. Another strategy for procuring raw material may have been to send expedition to areas such as the Katar region of Rajasthan for copper and South India for gold. This expedition established communication with local communities. Occasionally, finds for Harappa artifacts such as satite micro beads in these areas indications of such contact. There is an evidence in Kathar area for what archaeologists call the Ganeshwar Jodhpur culture with its distinctive non-Harappan portrait and unusual wealth of copper objects. It is possible that the inhabitant of this region supplied copper to the Harappans. Tracking social differences. Archaeologists generally use certain strategies to find out whether there were social and economical differences amongst people living within a particular culture. These include studying burials. You are probably familiar with the massive pyramids of Egypt, some of which were contemporaneous with the Harappan civilization. Many of the pyramids were royal burials where enormous quantities of wealth was buried. At burials in Harappan sites, the dead were generally laid in pits. Sometimes there were differences in The way of burial pit was made in the instance the hollowed out spaces were lined with bricks. Could this variation be an indication of social differences? We are not sure. Some graves contain pottery and ornaments, perhaps indicating a belief that these could be used in afterlife. Jewelry has been found in burials of both men and women. In fact, the excavation at the cemetery in Harappa in the mid 1980s, an ornament consisting of their shield, rings, and jasper, a kind of semi precious stone. Jewelry has been found in burials of both and women. Shield, a jasper of micro beads, was found near the skull of a male. In some instances, a dead were buried with the copper mirrors, but on the whole, it appears that the Harappans did not believe in buying precious things with the dead. Looking for luxurious. Another strategy to identify social differences in the study of artifacts, which archaeologists broadly classify as ultra luxurious. The first category includes objects of daily use made fairly easily out of ordinary materials such as stone or clay. These include the currents, pottery, needles, flesh rubbers, body scrubbers, and were usually found distributed throughout settlements. Archaeologists assume objects were luxurious if they are rare of made from objects non-local materials or with complicated technologies. Thus, the little pots of fences